If you've never slept on a bathroom floor because the tile was the coldest surface in your house, congratulations. You've lived a better life than I did during the hottest week Cedar Ridge, Georgia had seen in 23 years. By Wednesday afternoon, the temperature inside my house was 94 degrees. Outside, it was 101. And standing on my front porch, completely dry while sweat ran down my back like somebody had opened a faucet inside my shirt, was Cynthia Harwell, president of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. She pointed at the window air conditioner behind me. That needs to come out by tomorrow morning. I actually laughed. Not because she was joking. Because sometimes your brain laughs when the alternative is strangling somebody with their own clipboard. Cynthia, my central air compressor died yesterday. I understand. The replacement won't be here for almost a month. I understand. My house is 94 degrees. I understand. I stared at her. No, I don't think you do. She handed me a violation notice. Section 11. 6. No mechanical cooling equipment may be visible from any street, neighboring residence, or common area. $500 per day after the 24-hour correction period. I looked at the paper, then at her. You are fining me for staying alive. I'm enforcing the community standards. And that sentence right there. That was the beginning of everything. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 58 years old. I design industrial water systems for a living. And until that summer, I had never considered myself a difficult neighbor. I kept my lawn cut. I paid my dues. I waved at people even when I couldn't remember their names. My greatest neighborhood controversy had been accidentally leaving my garbage cans out until Tuesday morning. Cynthia, on the other hand, treated the HOA like she'd been appointed governor of beige America. She had opinions about everything. Fence stain, porch lights, garden hoses, Christmas decorations. Once she sent my neighbor Ruth a warning because her bird bath was architecturally inconsistent with the approved landscape theme. Ruth was 76. The bird bath had a ceramic frog on it. Apparently, the frog was destabilizing property values. Still, I stayed out of it. Then my AC died. The technician, Luis, took one look at the compressor and shook his head. She's gone, Marcus. How gone? Funeral gone. Can you fix it? He laughed. Sure. Give me a time machine and a compressor manufactured before everything went on back order. Best estimate. 3 to 5 weeks. So I bought 2 window units. One for the living room, one for my bedroom. Ugly. Absolutely. They looked like metal suitcases hanging out of the windows. But when that first blast of cold air hit my face, I nearly proposed marriage to the machine. 40 minutes later, Cynthia arrived. The next morning, I removed both units. Not because I agreed with her. Because $500 a day adds up fast, and I wasn't interested in financing Cynthia's next landscaping project. By noon, my house was 87 degrees. By 6:92, my Labrador, Cooper, was stretched across the kitchen tile with his tongue hanging out. I filled his water bowl with ice cubes. Then I sat at my dining table in gym shorts, shirtless, with a wet towel around my neck, reading the Cedar Ridge Covenants. All 286 pages. Have you ever read HOA bylaws? I don't recommend it. There are CIA interrogation techniques with more compassion. But around page 119, I found Cynthia's section. No auxiliary cooling equipment, mechanical apparatus, or related installation shall be visible from a public street, adjacent property, recreational space, or common area. I read it again. Visible. Not prohibited. Visible. I whispered the word out loud. Visible. Then something clicked. I pulled my laptop closer and started searching. Heat pumps, underground loops, ground source systems, geothermal. Most of the equipment could sit inside my utility room, while buried pipes exchanged heat with the ground. Nothing outside. No condenser. No fan. No window unit. No mechanical apparatus visible from anywhere. I searched the covenants for geothermal. Nothing. Ground source heat pump. Nothing. Underground HVAC. Nothing. Then I found another clause. Homeowners could install underground utility improvements within their property boundaries as long as they had county permits and didn't interfere with shared infrastructure. I smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough to scare Cooper. Thursday morning, I called a geothermal contractor named Elijah Boone. He showed up that afternoon in an old Ford pickup wearing work boots, suspenders, and the expression of a man who had spent 30 years fixing problems other people created. He looked at my dead AC, then at the HOA notice, then at me. She made you remove window units during this heat? Yep. He reread the notice. Because they were visible? Yep. Elijah scratched his beard. That's stupid. I was hoping you'd say that. He walked my property for almost an hour. I expected him to recommend a couple deep vertical wells. Instead, he stopped near the rear corner of my lot. You know you own farther back than your fence? What? He pulled up the county parcel map on his tablet. My fence had been installed by the previous owner almost 12 feet inside the actual property line. Behind it was a landscaped strip everyone assumed belonged to the HOA. Decorative grass, 3 crepe myrtles, a little stone walking path. Cynthia's pride and joy. But according to the county map, nearly a third of that strip was mine. I stared at Elijah. You're sure? I don't guess on property lines. We'll get a surveyor. The surveyor came Friday morning. Same answer. 11 feet, 8 inches beyond my fence. I owned it. The HOA had been landscaping part of my property for years. I called Cynthia. You might want to come by. She arrived 10 minutes later. I handed her the survey. She barely looked at it. This can't be correct. It's stamped. That garden has always been common property. Apparently, you've always been gardening on my property. Her jaw tightened. What exactly are you planning, Marcus? I smiled. Something invisible. Saturday morning at 7:30, the drilling rig arrived. Now, I want to clarify something. I did not drill 200 holes. I'm stubborn. I'm not insane. Elijah designed a vertical loop system requiring 6 boreholes, each hundreds of feet deep. But geothermal drilling isn't delicate. A 40,000-pound rig rolled through the section of fence weed removed and positioned itself on the rear portion of my lot. Metal tracks pressed into Cynthia's perfect decorative grass. Hoses uncoiled. Workers set up barriers. Mud tanks appeared. Then the drill started. The ground vibrated. Cooper barked once and ran inside. At exactly 7:42, Cynthia's back door flew open. There she came. White visor. Pink polo shirt. Sunglasses. Clipboard. She practically sprinted across the walking path. Marcus. I waved. Morning. What is that? Air conditioning. She looked at the drilling rig, then back at me. That is not air conditioning. Technically, it's the beginning of air conditioning. Shut it down. Why? You're destroying HOA landscaping. I pointed to the survey stakes. My landscaping. She froze. Then she changed tactics. This equipment is clearly visible. Temporary construction equipment. Your cooling system is visible. Not yet. It's about 300 feet underground. Elijah turned away because he was trying not to laugh. Cynthia marched closer. You are deliberately doing this to provoke me. I shook my head. No. You told me cooling equipment couldn't be visible. I'm making sure you never see mine again. By 9, half the neighborhood had wandered over. Mr. Patel brought coffee. Ruth brought muffins. Somebody's kid asked if we were drilling for oil. Cynthia called the county. An inspector arrived around 10:30. He checked our permits. He checked the survey. He checked the borehole barriers. Then Cynthia cornered him. There has to be something you can do. He looked confused. About what? He's drilling an industrial well field in a residential neighborhood. The inspector looked at Elijah. 6 geothermal bores? Yes, sir. County approved. Elijah handed him the paperwork. The inspector nodded. Looks fine. Cynthia pointed at me. He's doing this maliciously. The inspector looked at me. Are you installing a legitimate heating and cooling system? Yes. He looked back at her. Then maliciousness isn't really a building code. Ruth laughed so hard she spilled coffee on herself. That was the first moment I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. People were enjoying watching Cynthia lose. And that made me uncomfortable. Because anger can sneak up on you. At first, you want fairness. Then you want the other person embarrassed. Then you start telling yourself those are the same thing. By Monday, Cynthia had called an emergency HOA meeting. I almost didn't go. Then Ruth knocked on my door. You're coming. Why? Because she has bullied half this neighborhood for 6 years, and for once she's scared. So I went. The clubhouse was packed. Cynthia sat at the front with 3 board members. She opened by calling my geothermal installation a hostile act against the visual integrity of Cedar Ridge. I raised my hand. You mean the system nobody will be able to see? People laughed. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't funny. No, Cynthia. It wasn't funny when you told me to remove emergency cooling during a 100-degree heat wave. You had alternatives. What alternatives? Hotels. I have a 90-pound dog. Boarding. Cooper has anxiety. That is not the HOA's responsibility. There it was. Cold. Simple. Cruel. Ruth stood up. Neither is his air conditioner. The room went quiet. Then another neighbor spoke. My son's basketball hoop got fined because the net was red. Someone else said, you threatened me over my work van. Another woman said, you sent me a violation because my mother parked on the street during chemotherapy. Cynthia slammed her hand on the table. This meeting is about Marcus. No, I said. I stood. I don't think it is anymore. I pulled out a folder. Inside were the survey, my permits, the violation notice, and emails I'd exchanged with the county. Then I placed one more document on the table. A letter from my attorney, not threatening the HOA, offering them a choice. They could acknowledge my property boundary and reimburse me for 6 years of landscaping assessments charged on land that partially belonged to me. Or we could settle the boundary issue formally in court. Cynthia stared at the letter. You hired a lawyer? No. I've had one for 15 years. I'm an engineer, Cynthia. Half my job is permits and contracts. She looked around the room. Nobody was on her side anymore. The board voted to suspend enforcement of the exterior mechanical equipment rule, pending review. Then Ruth made another motion. A formal vote of no confidence in Cynthia's leadership. Cynthia stood so quickly her chair fell backward. You cannot be serious. Mr. Patel said. Actually, we've been serious for years. We were just quiet. That line hit harder than anything I could have said. The vote passed. 31-9. Cynthia wasn't immediately removed because the bylaws required a second recall vote 30 days later. But everybody knew what had happened. Her authority was already gone. 3 weeks later, my geothermal system came online. The first time I heard it running, I almost thought something was wrong. It was silent. No giant fan outside. No window units. Nothing visible. My thermostat dropped from 86 to 72 degrees while Cynthia stood on the walking path behind my house, staring at the freshly restored lawn. I stepped outside holding a glass of iced tea. She looked toward my house. I don't hear anything. I smiled. That's the idea. She looked down at the grass. Your equipment is under there? Some of it. Under my garden. I shook my head. Under my property. She stared at me for a long time. You spent all that money just to prove a point? That question bothered me. Because geothermal wasn't cheap. Not even close. I had spent far more than I would have repairing my old central system. So I told her the truth. At first. Maybe. She raised an eyebrow. But then I realized I'll probably live here another 20 years. The system is efficient, quiet, and it'll outlast whatever unit I would have installed outside. She laughed bitterly. So you think you won? I looked back at my house. Then at the restored lawn. Then at the neighbors who no longer lowered their voices when Cynthia walked past. No, I said. I think you lost. 30 days later, Cynthia was recalled as HOA president. Ruth replaced her. At Ruth's first meeting, she proposed rewriting the exterior equipment rule to include temporary emergency exceptions for heat waves, medical needs, and equipment failure. It passed unanimously. Almost. Cynthia voted no. Of course she did. And here's where I want your opinion. Part of me still wonders if I took it too far. I could have appealed the original fine. I could have waited for the replacement compressor. I probably could have solved the entire thing with a lawyer and a few emails. Instead, I spent thousands of dollars, brought a drilling rig into the neighborhood, exposed a property line problem, and helped trigger the removal of an HOA president. Was that justice? Or was it revenge dressed up as compliance? And maybe the bigger question is this. Why do some people only learn to respect boundaries after someone finally pushes back? Tell me what you would have done. Would you have removed the window unit and followed the rule? Fought the HOA legally? Or done exactly what I did and given them an invisible cooling system they could never complain about again? Drop your verdict in the comments. Team Marcus or Team Cynthia? And tell me where you think the line is between standing up for yourself and taking revenge too far. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, boss, neighbor, family member, or anyone else who used a tiny amount of authority like it made them king of the world, I want to hear that story too. Subscribe for more stories about people who underestimated the wrong person. Because sometimes the most satisfying response isn't breaking the rules. It's reading them more carefully than the person trying to use them against you.